Before I hit record, you described this as Bizarro world. Expound. Expound. The people need to hear. What do you mean by that? And we're living in Bizarro world.
Every single news article that I have read over the past week, the things that you have shared here just in the past half hour, has me shaking my head going, what is
How did we get here?
what is actually going on? This is some alternate reality that we have ducked into that has all the stuff that looks exactly the same except for some detail has been changed, and it's like, what?
It's
It's
like
a Rick and Morty episode.
that's what I was gonna say. If Rick and Morty, if that whole thing was weird, this is definitely not the regular old C-134.
It is not.
Universe. We are off track somehow.
Right. So whoever is close to the reset button on the simulation, hit that
And hit it right now.
because we need this thing reset in the big way.
Well, speaking of things being reset, so this week's downbeat is coming from the one and only Shaquille O'Neal. So one of the stories that people have been tossing around that I wanted to get us started with today is the fact that Shaq is done with fame. He said he is done with y'all and the way y'all treating me as a celebrity. This comes from the New York Post. Let's take a listen to what Shaq had to say.
Celebrities are crazy. I don't want to be in that category. They are. They're going freaking insane. Don't call me that anymore. These people are out of their freaking mind. How they treat people, what they do, what they say, that's never been me. I never want to be looked at like that. And, you know, all my life, you know, everyone probably gets stereotyped, but us celebrities, we get stereotyped because most of them celebrities are out of their damn mind.
He said not only are the fans doing too much, but the other celebrities are doing a lot as well.
He said, sitting in front of his wall of wine.
Right. What do you think about what you just heard from Shaquille O'Neal? That he's done being famous. Leave me alone.
It's wild how you have second thoughts about your chosen path once you get a little bit too far down it. Do you think
that's deep.
Do you think that that it's possible to eject like that?
Not for someone like him, because first of all, basketball aside, I think
Right.
basketball is an aside at this point, especially for the younger generation. He has been on the commercials for the General's car insurance.
Yeah.
He has sold printer cartridges, Icy Hot, pizza. He had a campaign with Papa John's. What else am I forgetting about? So he has been out here.
Right.
He is making some money
Right.
for somebody. All these organizations that, well, you know.
What?
Maybe the General is fine as an alumnus of Papa's plantation of Papa John's pizza. That's one that's a little iffy for me. But of course, Shaquille O'Neal has never had to be an actual employee of Papa John's. So that was years ago. You know,
Right.
that was between my degree and a job at one point. But I had fun, and my little red mini. Hey, people love seeing me come up. Anyway, so Shaquille O'Neal has done a lot of that, but he is a significant figure. Aside, again, we said aside from the basketball, but even aside from the advertisements, he was a cultural figure for me as a kid. I remember him as the genie, and I think it was called Shazam.
Shazam.
I mean, that was a thing for me. If we want to tie this in with music, Shaq rapped for a little bit. Do you remember that?
I do. Yeah.
And maybe he doesn't want us to remember that, but you know, it happened.
It did happen.
But anyway, it's just I bring it up, and I thought would be an interesting place for us to start today, because for the past couple weeks, maybe even for the past month, something in each opus, whether it's a piece of music we're talking about, an article, someone's opinion, whatever, has pointed toward getting away, going somewhere where you don't have to talk, where you're not famous, where you're just another face in the crowd. And we, you know, as podcast and radio folks, we feel that oftentimes. There have been times these past couple weeks even I've been like, I wish I could just go to an island somewhere and just be another black person with locks and nobody.
I just want to disappear backward into the hedgerow.
But I critique that because when I hear Shaq speak along those lines, where my mind goes to is, well, you've had all of these riches and all of the things that come with that
All the
stressful
spoils.
fame, the
Yep.
spoils of the fame, but you don't want to give that up. And I'm not sitting here dragging or reading Shaquille O'Neal, but I'm just saying that's where my mind goes. It's funny how you get all of the privileges of something, and when it's time to continue to pay the piper, as celebrities have to do, it can be a lot. So we can wag our finger in that way.
I would not wag anything in Shaq's direction.
but
Nope.
but I think that counts for us as well. I'm sure there are people who would say, well, would say to you, I'm sure there you've benefited from being on national radio and X, Y, and Z and da da da, but now you're saying you want to back up into the hedges. As soon as I find myself wagging my finger proverbially at Shaq in that way, I turn it around on myself and think, well, there've been a lot of privileges that I've celebrated as well, being in a spotlight that that hasn't always been the most comfortable. I mean, what do you think about that?
I think the same. And for me, it's about offering up the platform for somebody who is going to take it forward.
Yeah, yeah.
And I say it all the time, but my time on behind the mic is short.
Mm-hmm.
It is.
Yeah.
It's just getting time for new voices, different voices to take the conversation forward.
But the challenge is so many people want to back up from those positions without thinking about creating a space to where it's safe for someone to carry the mantle. We're getting to the spaces, the place, especially in classical music, where many of us don't want to be in the space to make it better or carry the mantle because we're walking into a fucked up room with papers,
Right.
the proverbial papers thrown everywhere, the desk turned over. It's like we have to make sure that we are cleaning up the office and making it nice for the next person before we start to talk about leaving it behind. We have to clean up our own mess that we've been, perpetuating over the course of our respective careers.
That is where I hope to go.
Yeah.
Is in that direction. I'm not talking about leaving the business. I'm talking about leaving the mic.
Sure.
Just do a different part of it.
No, I understand what you're saying, but in leaving the mic, that is its own space that has to be liberated enough for someone who can push it forward to feel like they can use the mic to say what we need to say or make the changes we want to make in our fields. That's really the part I'm saying. It's not fair, and I think about myself in this regard as well. I'm not just saying it at you, but I don't think it's fair for us to say, well, I'll back up from the mic and do something somewhere else if the mic hasn't been liberated or stretched or changed enough for the next person to move the conversation forward. If a person has been talking about Mozart and Brahms and only that, and I'm not saying you've done that, but if a person has only been focusing on that in that presentation space for 30 years, it is that much harder for the next person to come in and talk about some different music or some different perspective. So I still think there's some responsibility there. That's
the messy work that's happening right now.
Yeah, and it's not comfortable. It's hard work, but I feel like it's work that must be done before we can have the conversation of passing the baton. I feel like it's just sort of a cop-out if we aren't acknowledging that there's work for us to do. But even so, what I often come back to when I, again, getting back to the idea of getting away and being out of the limelight, I find myself at the center of a lot of rooms.
A lot of limelights.
So I feel like there must be something in me and something in people like me to where no matter what it is, we're always going to poke the bear, so to speak. We're always going to try to disobey the rules for the sake of lifting up someone else, some marginalized group or some marginalized person, even if that's in the cafeteria at the tiki bar at whatever island that I imagine in my mind. If somebody isn't being treated right in there, I am going to do something about it because I just have a propensity to cause trouble, I suppose. I can't stay out of it. So let's go ahead and get into this week's trouble. I'm Garrett McQueen.
I'm Scott Blankenship.
And this It's TRILLOQUY. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Opus 118 of the TRILLOQUY podcast. Thank you so much for being here. To the returning listeners, thank you for helping this audience and this idea and this initiative grow week after week. We really appreciate you. Thank you for your continued support. For new folks or semi-new people, thank you so much for being here. TRILLOQUY is a podcast that takes the phrase classical music and lifts it out of the ivory tower that has been built around it. We talk about Western classical music and other classical musics connected to the world, connected to opinion, all for the sake of anti-racism and decolonizing the phrase classical music. If you'd like more information on the TRILLOQUY podcast, or if you want to check out past opuses, just check out the website TRILLOQUY.org. You can also donate to TRILLOQUY there at TRILLOQUY.org. In addition to your support for TRILLOQUY comes from the Shuttleworth Foundation. The Shuttleworth Foundation funds individuals who are unafraid to reimagine the world and the way we live in it. More information there at shuttleworthfoundation.org. This week I also want to give a shout out and a thank you to Art Change Us. Their website is artsinachangingamerica.org. I had the opportunity this week to be featured with them and to explore dismantling eugenics through our respective anti-racist practices and work. A really interesting intersection there when we talk about purposeful and intentional desirability in reproduction, how that bleeds over into science and to journalism and, you guessed it, music and the arts.
Yeah.
So, really interesting conversation there. So I'll have a link to artsinachangingamerica.org in the description of this. Thanks to everyone over there to supporting the work. I also wanted to quickly say before we get into the first movement, if you have not done so and you're on Facebook, go to the TRILLOQUY Facebook page and hit that like and follow button. Facebook is giving me some nonsense that if I have time, I'll speak to in the final movement of this opus. But for now, let's get into movement one. Alrighty, Scott. Well, I got to come back with a natural. For folks who don't know, we add a natural to things if we want to continue to speak to something that we were speaking to or highlighting in a previous opus. So last week in the TRILLOQUY, we ended with my cousin out the United States, as far as what was going on at the southern border, with all the Haitians down there seeking refuge and looking for asylum in the United States. Well, not long after we recorded, and as I was touching stuff up and getting ready to upload, I came across the image that I ended up using for the opus last week. The image of this border patrol agent on a horse using a rope like a lasso or a whip or whatever.
The reins, yeah.
Rounding up these Haitians who are seeking safety and seeking a place to go. I really need to give it more than just the natural. I mean, it gets a flat and quite obviously it gets the buzzer, the problematic buzzer. I mean, the historical implications of white men on horses using anything close to a whip or anything that resembles it in any proximity to somebody black. I mean, just especially when you talk about the United States, what kind of person, what kind of twisted individual will saddle a horse and do that, understanding the history of this country? That is so maddening to see that image, because it just proves to me that white folks, a large number of white folks just do not care. So my first question is, what will it take for us societally to erase the quote unquote conservative or even Republican facade of straight up American racism, a complete lack of empathy for a person's life or for people's lives, fueled by a hate of black skin? That is what we're dealing with. And we will never hear that from the most so-called left-leaning or the most progressive of news sources out there reporting on this stuff and showing the country these images and giving us this information. What do you think, Scott, is going to take for us to move the conversation there? We can talk about, this is I don't even know how to say what I'm trying to say. Like, you'll hear people talk about, well, I'm all for America first, or I'm all for protecting our borders and X, Y, and Z. That's the language, but it's a dog whistle.
It is.
For, I don't want these black folks, I don't want these brown folks in our country coming across. So what do you think is going to take for us to start to speak more frankly on this subject and really name the racism for what it is.
Can I ask one question before that?
Okay.
You said that you didn't run across that image until you were putting things together to post
Right.
that opus.
Right.
How hard do you avoid looking at news?
Honestly, for the last 4 months minus the last about 2.5 weeks, I didn't watch any cable news because there was already enough for me to do. I had a lot on my plate anyway, so it's not like I have an hour to just sit in front of the TV. But if I was gonna watch some TV, the news, cable news or otherwise, was not going to be it. Now, I will say, in the past couple weeks, when I've come in here into the studio in the mornings to get started on work, I'll put it on CNN and mute it. So if something crazy, like real crazy, is happening, I see it, and it's in my eyesight. And that's actually how I came across the image. I was like, "What in the world I didn't know if they were shooting a new movie, or I shouldn't laugh." But so I unmuted the TV and heard this story, and I just could not believe it. That's how I got there.
Yeah, I was just curious because for me, that image was inescapable.
Yeah,
I saw that
everywhere,
and early. In the day.
As we were talking about it last week?
I had already seen it.
Oh, see, I hadn't yet.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow. I wish you'd have brought it up. Well, we're talking about it now. But anyway, back to the original question.
Yeah.
What's going to get us away from the dog whistling and just naming what we're fighting against? People naming what they're standing in solidly, this racism. How can we inspire that part of the discourse?
I also wanted to say that there were no news outlets that I looked at that were propping that up as okay. So the administration's taking heat from all sides for that. I don't know what that's going to mean.
Sure.
But as far as what more can you do to convince somebody of it? If you show them the footage, okay, so we're looking at it right now. There's some footage in that story right there. We've seen the pictures. How do you deny it? And if you ask me, the people who are all for protecting the borders, the hard riders, the people who think that white people should be in America, why didn't they applaud that?
Well, they do, just in the comforts of their home and around the dinner table,
But yeah, the administration gets attacked from that vantage point too. The people who are the hardliners on the border. What is it going to take?
Where I want the conversation to go, I want my opposition to be racists who understand that they are racists. I don't want the opposition to be people who don't want to be tread on, or people who are patriots, or people who love America, because all of that is language that just sheathes the truth, the root of the issue. So I'm trying to figure out how we can get these problematic white people to say, look, I don't want those blankers from Haiti in this country, and that's just that. If we can just speak in that plain way, I think that is actually going to be more of a step forward, because we'll stop pretending that we're doing something that we're not doing. Okay. And then on top of that, I came across this article. I'm reading from borderreport.com, which will tell you automatically this is problematic. The headline is Governor Greg Abbott vows to hire Border Patrol agents if Biden fires them. Texas Governor Greg Abbott promised to hire the Border Patrol agents on horseback who received backlash after a video of the agents using their split reins to control their horses in Del Rio. The video and pictures led to accusations that the agents were, quote, whipping migrants or attempting to threaten those migrants. Look, like I'm saying, all of this dog whistle ass conversation and discourse. What do you mean attempting to threaten them? Oh, if you see somebody charging you, whipping around or flailing around a rope or whatever it is, and you have been traveling across water and land after dealing with the assassination of your president and an earthquake, you want to sit down, okay? And you're doing everything you can to find peace and asylum, and some white man is charging you on horseback. What do you mean attempting to intimidate? That's what I'm talking about. We have to stop using all of this bullshit language that is just plausible, lightly saying what is obvious to me and to every other black person.
The video, what does it say? The video and pictures led to accusations the agent were whipping migrants. attempting to threaten those. Okay, so that's the quote that you just talked about.
Yeah.
Accusations. They have picture and video of the guy doing it.
Anyway, how should
I know.
Looping it back around to
Right.
the arts, how should arts organizations respond to this, in your opinion? And arts organizations across the board, radio, opera house, symphony hall, music school. Is this something that you feel like should remain separate? Do you think there is an appropriate way for those sorts of institutions to speak to and address this issue? What are your thoughts there?
Speaking out about it, yeah, in either their online presence or before the concert starts or something, program music to speak to it. Especially, we can do this all across the country, but especially in those regions being affected. So there's got to be a Texas orchestra or chamber group or something that can put something together to.
Yeah, because I'm
to it.
gonna say it. I mean, across the country and around the world, but especially in Texas. If there's any arts organization down there that does not have this front and center, I have no reason to assume that you aren't complicit in this and you're completely okay with it. Because as we have laid out on this podcast over and over again, no response is a response. That is definitely a response, especially if this is something in your backyard.
So, but really though, just programming a concert to it or making a statement or something like that's not going to be enough. Would it, like maybe a fundraiser concert or some sort of an awareness campaign? What do you think what might it look like?
Nothing is ever going to be enough if we want to boil it down to that, because let's say the Houston Symphony raises $1 million, okay, there are a lot of people who are not going to be served with just $1 million. So, there will always be more work to do. So I feel like we can't scoot away from the work in an effort to not be performative, because,
right.
That it gets really murky. But I don't know. My idea is that just raising awareness, is very much multifold. So when I'm thinking in my radio programming mind, programming Haitian music, even in the most, I'm playing it safe way, because of course I wouldn't. But if a host or a presenter just feels completely uncomfortable addressing it, even having the Haitian music there makes it assures the fact that your audience is thinking about that country and that culture and hopefully those people, and then moreover the people at the southern border of that culture and of that heritage, and how that is a contemporary challenge that must be addressed. So I don't know, like I don't want to say F you to the whole state of Texas, because that thing about the governor coming out and being like, well, I'm gonna make sure they have a job, that is something else. But like I said, when we were a few weeks ago, when we were talking about the reproductive rights and all that down in Texas, there's no neutral. There is just no neutral, and you have to do something with your position of power or otherwise to make sure that you're raising some sort of awareness here, So on this issue, and there's always issues, but this is one that just really speaks to a lack of empathy when it comes to the historical narrative of what we saw, the contemporary idea of the United States being comfortable being the world police but not the world's caretaker, and we have the ability to speak to it through our art, and not only the ability but the responsibility. All right, I'll post all that stuff in the description for y'all to look at, but we're gonna transition out of this accidental with a piece of music by a Haitian composer. We featured a Haitian composer named Julio Racine before a couple times. I was actually listening to another Haitian composer that I learned about earlier this week, the late Jean-Rudy Perrault, and he actually has a piece in his catalog, appropriately enough, titled Exodus. It's a piece of music for string quartet. So this is the end of the third movement titled Hope, Exodus for string quartet by Jean-Rudy Perrault. Another one of those empty hall performances there. Those are members of the Philadelphia Orchestra. The video was recorded. The performance was recorded back in February 2021. And when you think about the idea of Exodus, especially with a movement subtitled Hope, you might assume that it's going to be something sort of ethereal, maybe even something smooth, but the agitato we heard in that performance, the agitated sound, I think is another great opportunity, again, in the context even of just the music, to get your audiences to think about the issue that's there. I could definitely do something with that. You know, so anyway,
I see where you're coming from.
Anyway, let's not ignore this. Let's not pretend that this thing, it does not exist, and let's not pretend that this isn't just good old fashioned white folks hating black folks here on this American soil in these so-called United States. All right. Well, speaking, Scott, I spoke to orchestras and other performing arts institutions using their resources to do what they can for good. You have some folks who are using their resources to do something.
They're doing something.
Take it away.
I would like to give this a flat. And the title of the article from theconversation.com is How a Team of Musicologists and Computer Scientists Completed Beethoven's Unfinished 10th Symphony. So I wanted to just just lay this on you cold to get your natural reaction.
I mean,
and just say, hey, you know what, Garrett, new Beethoven dropped, and just to see how you would react.
New Beethoven dropped.
Right?
Oh, all of that money and all of that energy for. Let's read a little bit of this. I'll read from the top.
Now, to give a little bit of context, you said that people have done this with Mahler. Schubert's 8th Symphony has been finished.
And let me back all the way up. So for folks, because we're not leaving anybody behind. For folks who don't know, for those of you who and good for you for knowing nothing about Beethoven, congratulations.
This has got to be a record explosion.
He wrote 9 symphonies, okay?
Yes.
And he barely finished that 9th one because he couldn't hardly hear. Well, there have been musicologists over the years that say they have found extracts from a 10th symphony, and I guess in the style, I haven't even read this yet, but in the style of Beethoven, they've put together a 10th one, even after death.
According to the person who wrote this, it says, I have presided over the artificial intelligence side of this project, meaning they used AI startup Playform AI, taught the machine both Beethoven's entire body of work, and I'm not sure how they did this. They taught the computer Beethoven's creative process.
Well, the AI is smart. There are songs by artists created by AI, even the recording these days.
I think Spotify's just making up music and putting it out there.
Spotify is who was Will Smith fighting against in iRobot, whatever company that was making those robots. I feel like Spotify has an office in that building or something,
Yeah, they won't even, since I quit my membership, they won't even let me listen to liked songs in their entirety. I get like 45 seconds of it. Anyway, to carry on. So this is a combination of real life and AI coming together to record. It has been recorded. A full recording of Beethoven's 10th Symphony is set to be released. Circle this on your calendar, October 9th, 2021. Same day as the world premiere performance, scheduled to take place in Bonn, Germany, the culmination of a 2-year-plus effort.
What pisses me off is that we have to beg y'all to play music and to highlight music, platform music by the Jean Perraults and all of these composers of color, women of color, but y'all gonna be falling over yourself to make sure that your audience hears that 10th Symphony.
Give me the ding ding.
The ding ding.
Well, no, because that's what I thought you were going to say.
All that.
Because you remember when I brought in the cat concerto, and you're like, there is a composer out there.
I am tired.
Who is who's alive and ready now.
That's what I'm saying. Right. Even beyond the historical women and composers of color.
Right.
I've been in conversation with composers here on the ground, here in the Twin Cities, who talk about how it's just impossible to get one of these orchestras to pay attention to your music. Oh, but goodness gracious, Beethoven's 10th. one of the other things I'll speak to quickly is, this idea of the curse of the ninth. So back in the Romantic era, the idea that a composer, because of Beethoven, if he tried to write a 10th symphony, he would die. That actually happened for several composers. I think you mentioned Mahler. He only made it to 9 symphonies. There are a lot of composers who only made it to 9. There are a lot who wrote more, of course, but, especially the way they tied religion and the holy and God and classical music back then. If, God himself said, okay, 9 symphonies out of Beethoven is enough. That should be enough for us as well.
Is that wrong?
Question. Anyway,
so who's gonna have the curse fall on them out of this project?
All right. Anyway, so if y'all want to hear Beethoven 10, I'm annoyed. I'm annoyed because the performances. Oh my gosh, the people who are going to be so fucking excited to play Beethoven's 10th Symphony and to platform it. Yeah, I mean, you're going to have to write a break about it. You will be talking about it on the radio. It is going to come down the pipelines.
I think I'm going to lose power on that computer right around that time.
You heard it here first, folks. Anyway, all right. Well, let's move on from this so we can get to the final accidental for the first movement. But I did want to transition with music by who I call my favorite symphonist. So when I'm talking about symphonies in the most traditional Western European sense, I love the symphonies of Dmitri Shostakovich because he put all of the schematics and paradigms and rules of a symphony into his work, but they were just so different and really spoke to the moment. I often, when I make this point, I'm usually pointing to the first symphony of William Grant Still, how he made it jazzy and juba and all that, but still followed all the symphonic rules, the symphony rules of writing a symphony. Well, Shostakovich did the same thing, and he survived the curse of the ninth. He wrote not only 9, 10, or 11, but 15 symphonies. So, take that, Beethoven. see, the goddess decided she wanted to hear more from Shostakovich and not Beethoven. But anyway, and she tried because she took away his hearing. She was like, okay, all right, this is already enough. Let me take care of that hearing of yours, and still managed to write 4 more. So they ought to, let me stop playing.
Is this your favorite Shostakovich?
My favorite Shostakovich symphony is his first symphony because there's something again, as we have been described in the press, reckless. There's something, especially because when you talk about how Shostakovich was dealing with Stalin and all that, so he could have gotten into some real trouble.
He could have died,
and he did. And he did. Well, he did. He ended up joining the party at the end of his life, but he definitely got into some major trouble over the course of his life. Anyway, it all, this body of work by my favorite symphonist, it ends, at the end of this 15th symphony with something a little spooky, something that leaves a question mark on his legacy. So we'll listen to a bit of this, the finale to Shostakovich 15, to get us into our final accidental. I would say that's a pretty nice way to put a bow on your legacy as a symphonist, but some motherfucker gonna come and talk about Shostakovich 16, right?
I don't know. Are there fragments of it around somewhere?
Anyway, I'm tired because, look, the point is there is music by folks that are alive and well that we're ignoring, and we're computer generating more of the status quo. I can't. Hashtag I can't.
I thought it would be fun. I didn't mean to tax you. I'm sorry. I thought we could bat it around a little bit.
Classical music is taxing. There's just no way to get around it.
Yeah.
All right, one more accidental for this week. So as folks don't know, because this is audio and not video, typically when Scott and I record here in Studio G, I have the window open. But what I mean by that is I turn on a live stream of some camera somewhere around the world. So it looks like we're, looking out the window at the beach in Maui or on the trains in Norway. Or whatever. Yeah. Well, tonight I pulled out just a stream of Times Square, and we actually saw the stream, or folks watching the stream, of Fire Shut Up in My Bones, the Terence Blanchard opera that premiered tonight at the Metropolitan Opera, the first time an opera by a black composer ever hit that stage. Now, just, again, for the new folks, we celebrate the firsts for the people, not for the institutions, because the Met has been around for 100-something years. There have been operas by all kinds of black folks, dead and alive, men and women. And this is the first time. So shame on y'all, the Met, okay? Because that's pitiful. That's pitiful. But shout out and congratulations to Terence Blanchard. So give him a little bit of applause. So I'm actually going to see this opera in a couple of weeks. So I'm excited to be in New York and take part in this historic moment. Again, if they set up chairs and a thing in Times Square to watch an opera, it must be, something pretty cool. So I'm looking forward to it. But I'm going to give this bit of news a natural, because the reaction to it has just, naturally been what I expected.
Sure.
on the Metropolitan Opera's Facebook page, it got really spicy, and it looks like, I'm scrolling, it looks like whoever does the social media over there has deleted a lot of the negative things, because all you're seeing are folks writing about
a response,
how it is, how can I say, like taking up for the opera, because obviously people were on here talking about, oh, this isn't real opera and XYZ and da-da-da. Now, the clip that the Met posted, I'm sure from a rehearsal, featured what looked to me like fraternity stepping, and we can have the conversation of perping, and all of that. Are those all real Kappas on stage? Because, we need to talk about that. But I trust that with black folks in the room, that was something that was addressed. But anyway, the social media was getting crazy. Folks talking about this ain't opera. Oh, we're here for Rossini. We're here for Mozart and all this stuff. But, that comment section and the narratives that are there, it reiterates the trepidation that black folks like me and other folks have when we talk about going into any opera or any classical music space, much less the uppercase T, the Metropolitan Opera. If we have folks with that attitude in the comment section, of course, especially considering those ticket prices, we have folks in the hall having those ideas. So I'm going to see, I'm looking forward. I'm not only looking forward to seeing it, I'm looking forward to coming back and telling y'all about my whole experience.
Sure.
Because as I've told people, I've been liberated. I don't wear church socks. So I'm going in my Timbs. It's because it's New York. I have to wear my Timbs.
Okay.
But so I'm not going to be in there with a suit on. I'm going to look my nice. It's not like I'm going in with a t-shirt or with mustard stains on it, or but not that I would ever, but I'm going to show up as I am, and we'll see what happens. I think one of the things that we need to continue to address, in the downbeat, in the downbeat, we were talking about how we have the responsibility to make the bed, to set the room of the space that we want to back up from, so that it can be more diverse or whatever. We just can't leave and say, well, your problem now. I think one of the ways that that's happening here with this opera, again, the first black opera at the Met, is that we aren't talking about the space for the audience itself being a safe space for those black folks. I mean, if white folks are talking about all this stuff in the comment section, do you not think some of them will go and hate watch the opera in the same way that we hate watch or hate participate in everything else in society?
Boy, they must be some real masochists if that's the case.
Or they're that dedicated to their ideals and their beliefs. They want to be there so that they can say, well, and I'm not just saying that I went to the opera and da-da-da and blah, blah, blah. I feel like there's going to be a lot of that there by the time this is done running.
How long does the Met typically run a production?
I'm not sure, but I think this is running for about 3 weeks. because I'm going in 2 weeks from this moment when we're recording.
So even the person that is the most against, let's not even say a black composer, the most against a new opera, because it's not the fine classic canon or whatever.
Right.
You can't give up 3 weeks.
No, because they want it all. What did Freddie Mercury say? I want it all.
Yeah, and wanted it now, I guess.
Well, I think the other, one of the other things I'm thinking about is, and you make a great point, let's even, I don't take race out of things, but let's take race out of it, just a new opera. This culture, this atmosphere that the Met has coddled these people into having for all of, these decades, over 100 years, is being challenged now, and they don't like that. And I think as we move forward, using these buzzwords like inclusivity and diversity and access, those words specifically, we aren't talking about the backlash, the white lash, the tenseness that's being created in those spaces. And I think that is definitely going to be one of the narratives to come out of this whole opera run after it's all said and done.
Yeah, you're hitting on something with the access piece, because I don't think that I could afford comfortably a Met ticket. Listen, and what are these going for?
Yeah, I can't comfortably afford it myself, but I mean, I'm paying to be in there. I think I don't have the seat map pulled up, but the nosebleeds, the nosebleeds for the show that I'm going to are $50. And if I'm going to spend $50, I feel like, and I'm privileged, I have it. If I'm going to spend $50, I better spend $150 and be able to see something. But even the one, I think the ticket I'm getting is $170. Even that is not like the seat. The seats that I would love to have are like $700 and $800. And if you pull up the seat map, it's not red dots down there. It's white dots, which means the seats have been bought.
Sold.
They're sold. So people have this. So when we talk about, this access and inclusion, it's fine. It's great that they have put out chairs on Times Square for you brokies to take a look at the opera. But we want to make sure that, we reserve the real seats for our fur coat wearers.
Is that something new? The broadcast out in Times Square, is that something new?
I don't know either way.
Because the New World Symphony down in South Beach has been doing that like since they opened.
They set up the outdoor brokey section, is what you're saying?
It seemed like that section was the popular one because you could, lay down and have your wine and all that kind of stuff.
And the conversation that they don't have, that I've heard from people who live down there, is that they shoo off the houseless people who sleep there so that they can set that up. See, that's a weekly exercise down there as well.
Okay, so then having the money to go and have one of the nice seats and everything and separate yourself from the rabble-rousers, the houseless, right? I mean, isn't that part of it? Keeping yourself away from that element? For the people buying that ticket. I'm not saying for me.
I mean,
but for the people spending the money, isn't that part of the allure, the eliteness of it?
But see, they see the blackness trickling in. It starts with the Terence Blanchard opera. And next, y'all are gonna just put anything up there on stage, and let
me tell everybody.
Why are you acting like you don't understand how these people act?
Let me tell you a little bit about Garrett. I like to set the table, and Garrett likes to come in and shove it while I'm setting the table. So thanks for that.
The tickets need to be cheaper. Listen, Metropolitan Opera people, the tickets need to be cheaper, period. There need to be $10 and $15 and $20 tickets to this thing. Mm-hmm. And if you want black folks to be there, you can't rely on the few of us who managed to scrape and save up a few dollars to go. Because, and I just really want to make the point, this is a historic thing. So that is my means of justifying spending the little couple coins I have, to go buy one of these tickets. But it's not like I just have it either to just, because I'm not going to, typically I would say I better be going to see Beyonce if I'm spending $200 on something.
Oh, I can't think of an artist that I would pay that much to go and see.
But it's a historic moment, and I want to be back here to give y'all the real tea of what it's like for someone like me who is problematic. I'm going to have a joint on me. I won't try to smoke it in the theater, maybe. We'll see. Anyway, we mentioned we mentioned Freddie Mercury, so how about we transition into the second movement with a little bit of that tune.
screaming with no time for doubt. With the pain and anger, can't see a way out. It ain't much I'm asking.
Where do you rank that one? As when it comes to the catalog of Queen? Everyone talks about Bohemian Rhapsody, and that is an incredible composition. But that tune there, would you consider that an A side or a B side?
Oh, that's an unsung gem.
Oh,
right
is
there.
it?
Yeah.
I only know it because I think of a T-Mobile commercial. So
Yeah.
so shout out to T-Mobile. This is not an ad.
And shout out to Brian May, the guitarist. Yeah.
Oh, that's who was playing all that fancy stuff
yeah,
at the beginning.
he's a legend.
Yeah. So shout out to Queen, and we're here in the second movement where Scott and I are taking the second ending. We take a piece of music that we've been spending a bit of time with this week, and instead of repeating it, we take the second ending to let y'all know why we were repeating it all week. I know we planned for you to go first, but because we just heard that attitude, I'm gonna go ahead and keep that energy up. So
Okay.
I have been preparing for a couple of performances. Okay, so I'm actually getting the bassoon out and going down and playing my scales.
You
and
changed your profile pic and everything.
Oh, I did? Okay, so one of them
On
maybe.
Instagram, yeah. To you know, the profile of you playing the bassoon. So
Oh,
you must
okay.
be in playing mode.
Oh, yeah, I like to rotate them because if you look at my Twitter and my Facebook, it's not that photo. So I just like to make
okay.
sure that folks
Okay.
remember, that I'm a real musician, and as soon as I start practicing and taking one of these auditions, it's over for some of y'all.
It's over for you.
But anyway,
losers.
and it'll be over for me too, because anyway, so I haven't been just listening to music in the way that I normally do because I've been practicing. I've been doing that. I've been listening to the metronome. Shout out to John Del Vento. But the one tune that I have managed to make my way to just of happenstance is one that, for many people, they hear every morning. So where I want to start is that, for the black folks or anyone who listens to the Breakfast Club out of New York, speaking of the Met, I guess we're still in New York here a little bit. If you listen to the Breakfast Club and you wake up for the opening of the show, you hear a bit of this. And that's what they hear, okay? So the first point I want to make is that this music does not fall into the core sound or the programmatic center of most black stations. I would argue to say all black stations, and yet the black-run Breakfast Club radio show, for years now, has affirmed that piece of music is not only a great one to wake up to, but one that all people should celebrate, despite genre, despite community. Of course, Smells Like Teen Spirit by Nirvana. To that point, and we won't spend a whole bunch of time talking, but to that point specifically, most of the stations that carry that radio show are hip hop R&B stations, and they play that. Is that not enough to push the needle when it comes to broadening the general aesthetic and sound of other types of stations? Dare I even say classical stations, to step out even for a little bit, just to affirm some great music that might not necessarily fit into the box that the radio station fits into?
Why do you think they picked it?
Because I think it's a really dope song, and I think it's a great one to listen to as you wake up. And it's a great part of the catalog.
Do they just play the intro, or do they get into the vocals? How much of it gets heard?
It's the song is the bed music for hello, good morning, welcome, all that stuff. So some mornings you hear nearly the whole thing.
Oh.
Sometimes it's not, but all of that aside, I don't think that matters as much to the point as I'm trying to make that is an aesthetic that you don't hear on a classical station, right? And there's no difference between that not fitting a classical format and that not fitting a hip hop and R&B format, but yet it's affirmed. That's the point I'm trying to make.
I see what you're saying.
Go ahead.
No, all I was trying to get at is, why? Why would they use it though?
Because it's great music, and there's a lot of great music out there. I don't know what happened when they were in the room and they decided to do it. But it's a good fit, and thanks to that show, it's a tune that more folks who might not be into that genre of music can appreciate, and then go on to appreciate the legacy of Kurt Cobain and all of that stuff, just providing that window of access despite the so-called rules of genre. That's what I'm trying to say.
Bring up the drum kick early in that. Can you back it up and bring in the drum kick one more time? No, where the drums first hit. Because Dave Grohl is the drummer, right?
Okay.
Okay, now bring it up. He said he lifted that from the Sugar Hill Gang.
See, look at black people giving it all to y'all. Okay,
It wasn't given; it was stolen. It was lifted.
Well, I'm talking about giving the culture, providing the sound.
Okay.
Anyway, so it's I think on September 10th it was the 30-year anniversary of that tune. So
Yeah.
again, not only this incredible song, but an important anniversary of the tune. I hear that and I think of non-conformist thought as it existed in the grunge scenes of the 90s. And I know that every generation likes to act like we reinvented the wheel, or we're the first ones who were really trying to push the needle. But even, in my younger perspective, I was, 5 years old when this song came out, or whenever it came out. But from that perspective, I can see a youth that did something different than the youth of the 80s, your generation, something different than the hippies of the previous generation, the flower power and all that. To me, that is new energy. And when I hear that song, I'm just reminded of the new energy that today's younger generation, the folks even younger than me at this point, are bringing to the table. I wouldn't say that the idea of pushing over these tables, these status quos, erasing genre, all of these conversations, I wouldn't necessarily say that they're new, but the energy surrounding it feels pretty new. And this piece of music just reminds me of that idea and that concept.
It's an interesting point.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So I as much as I love, the idea again of knocking over, what we're supposed to say is the sound of a station or a hall or a space or whatever. I think that piece of music, if it's good enough to be featured on a hip hop and R&B station every Monday through Friday, I think that piece of music and that aesthetic has room in other spaces, even classical spaces. But even to that, there have been arrangements of the tune made that, are a little more comfortable for the folks who love following rules. So one of the groups I've been following for probably about 20 years now is a chamber music ensemble from Australia. I think Australia. They're called, I'm sorry if it's New Zealand, but they're definitely down under. They're called Aston. I used to program them all the time at my first radio gig in Knoxville. I put a couple of their tracks on when I was sub-hosting in St. Louis. And among their many covers is Nirvana's Smells Like Teen Spirit. So let's listen to a little of this so-called classical take on it to get to your accidental or your music. What you think of that? Would you speak to that and affirm that with pride if it made it across one of your playlists?
That's
maybe even tell a story about how back when you smelled like Teen Spirit.
It seems like they're trying really hard.
What it
seems like to
shade.
me.
Oh my God.
I don't know. I'm going to go back to the Beethoven thing and go, why don't I play something by a living composer and somebody working now?
Sure.
Why not play something that ensemble wrote?
Yeah.
Or arranged or something. Maybe they did arrange that. I don't. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Why does it have to be a cover?
My comeback to that is that in the way that we have to affirm living composers and do all of that, I think a part of the work, at least from my perspective, is breaking down the status quo. And that is a type of music, despite the fact that it's a cover, that I think in a classical space breaks down that status quo.
Okay.
And so that would be my justification and the reason why I would push something like that to the front when we talk about classical programming.
What I want to push to the front is a track that would you call Autumn Leaves a torch song or like a standard? How would you
I don't think I know this piece of music.
You don't?
No.
Oh, gosh. Okay. Well, K.D. Lang is the version that I picked. And this is an example of an artist that has been out there in one genre. And then later on, like as a mellowing of the career, you know, starts to stretch out into other genres. And I think that her voice and her presence is more powerful in the style of Autumn Leaves than it is. You might recognize the song Constant Craving from the radio. Do you remember that?
Not by name.
Well, that was K.D. Lang's big.
Okay.
Yeah.
What genre are you talking about?
Oh, she's a singer-songwriter, you know, maybe adult contemporary.
Okay, well, you know, thanks to the barriers and the walls we build around genre, I've never heard of that or her. So.
Okay.
And that's my point. That's my point.
And Autumn Leaves, the way that she does it here, is more in the style of a torch song.
And what do you mean by that? A torch song?
You know, the classics, not the classics from the classical era, but I'm talking like a 40s and 50s big band sort of vibe.
Oh, okay. I've never heard that phrase, torch song. Okay.
I might not be using it right. That's entirely possible. But Autumn Leaves is I'm not even sure who wrote it, but you know, let's find that out real quick.
The autumn leaves drift by my window. The autumn leaves of red and gold. I see your lips.
Here it lists a few writers: Jacques Prévert, Johnny Mercer, and Joseph Cosma.
Yeah. Johnny Mercer, yeah.
Okay, but I like the vibe of this, and it's not lost on me that, you know, the leaves are starting to turn here, and we're hearing this music. But you're saying that the original of this was like a big band, or
I've heard it that way. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, over the weekend I was in a part of Minneapolis called the North Loop, and just the way that the leaves would sort of get stuck in like a little tornado in the entryway of some of the buildings. You've got this sun that it feels like you're just under a heat lamp, and then you go into the shade and you'll freeze.
Sure.
You know, so we're in
Sure.
that part where you're not really sure if you should wear shorts and the short sleeve shirt,
right?
or actually put on, you know, some real fall clothes. Or
You have to
something
do
like
a San
that.
Francisco style and always carry around a light sweater.
I guess you have to.
This time of year.
But the way that K.D. Lang, her breathiness too in it, is almost like every line that she sings is being sighed.
Yeah.
And it has that vibe of the season. I listened to it, I don't know, probably half a dozen times over the last week. And I wish that KD would do more of this sort of vibe.
It's beautiful.
The pop songs that she wrote, that was fine, you know, but I really enjoy this from KD.
Yeah, it's beautiful music. And again, I feel like I say this in some way. I point to this every week, but when I hear this, let me go back to a little of it here. So we're hearing the
concertina.
I was gonna say bandoneon, but sure, concertina. Got some strings in there, the soft rhythm in there, got a string bass. There's probably a little bit, there's some piano in there, and then you have Miss Lang singing so beautifully on top of it. If we took her out and the melody, instead of K.D. Lang singing, was a violin or a flute or something, it would be completely acceptable for so many of these classical spaces. But the fact that we are hearing the human voice disqualifies it. The more that I just return to that idea, the more ridiculous it seems to me. Just like the, Taste Like Teen Spirit, I think that is definitely a piece of music that deserves a spot in those classical spaces, especially this time of year, because that whole vibe and that whole aesthetic is reminding people, it can remind audiences of exactly the thing you were speaking to. The leaves changing. For the first time in a few months, months you actually feel a little chilly, and
Yeah.
you know, 50, even here in Minnesota, you know, 58 degrees after summer feels like, ooh, there's a little chill in the air now. You know, come April and even May, we're going to be hoping for 58 degrees, right? But
Yeah.
58 whole degrees.
It is
but
really weird how after a hot summer, 45, 50 degrees, it's like, ooh, geez.
Yeah.
But then after a cold winter, you will go out barefoot in 45 degrees.
I think even National Public Radio, the cartoonists, they drew a picture. You know, 70 degrees in the fall, the woman is bundled up and has
Yep.
her pumpkin spice latte.
Yep.
70 degrees in the spring, she's in shorts and ready to go swimming.
Right.
So it's all relative, just like everything.
So
in the
when
world.
so actually try this out. When you listen to that track on the playlist, get your pumpkin spice latte and pour it down the drain.
I'll drink a nice PCL every now and then, PSL every now and again.
Okay.
But I'm more about the matcha. I think that's
Oh,
a
yeah?
nice autumn beverage for me. All right, well, we're getting into the third movement here. This week's guests are Marcus Norris and Terell Johnson. Marcus Norris is a composer, a millennial composer who has seen a bit of success across the country with many different premieres and performances. One of the things that I have coming up is the performance of one of his bassoon and piano works. So, you know, I'm getting into even the contemporary chamber music, which is really fun. But he's also had a violin concerto called Glory performed by a few orchestras across the country, including the Chicago Philharmonic, not to be confused with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, but another group there, the Chicago Philharmonic. The new executive director of the Chicago Philharmonic is Terell Johnson. So he also joins to talk about some of their collaborations, what the movement forward looks like from the composer perspective, and what the movement forward looks like from the institutional perspective, all the way up to the executive director. So I'm looking forward to sharing this conversation with y'all. Where we start the conversation is, you know, many reviewers will say Marcus's music brings a different feel into the space. Again, we're talking about general aesthetics. So I start out by asking Marcus about that, and we sort of just run with it. So to get us to our conversation, we're going to listen to the tail end of Glory as published here on his website that I will have available in the description of this. So here's Glory by Marcus Norris, and here's my conversation with Marcus Norris and Terell Johnson from the Chicago Philharmonic Orchestra.
I try to just write about human experiences always. That's just my relationship with art. Like all of the arts is like, I try to base them in real things that we're all going through or that are deeply personal. When I was younger and I was an undergrad, I was really like nervous about like this whole, like, cause I work in different genres and I try to like often like put them together in the same events or and all of this. And so I was like nervous about people that would maybe, if they're coming for like the concert music, maybe they don't want to hear rap and R&B, or people that's coming for rap and R&B, maybe they don't want to hear concert music, like instrumental things. And then I had a mentor tell me like, what's from the heart reaches the heart. And it just always stuck with me since then. So I just try to always write from the heart when I'm making things, and then just trust that, you know, it'll touch the heart of somebody else.
Yeah. So Terell, to that, as new Chicago Philharmonic executive director, what do you want audiences to feel? How do you approach that question?
I think most importantly is they should feel inspired. You know, they should, you want to take them on a journey, take them away for that 90 minutes or 2 hours for a performance. And something I think is so exciting with programming and with our art form is being able to kind of capture like the human experience and condition and all these emotions and everything, you know, sonically, and to have so many people interpret it in different ways and you know, just have so many different experiences sitting in the same theater. And so I just want people to be inspired. I want people to just have a moment to be taken on a trip.
Yeah.
So for me, programming is so important, and that's why I've been so excited working with Marcus and just having unique music being heard, music that reflects artists of our time and the now and our conditions now. So I think it's great to honor the music of the past, but I think it's so important to look to the future, especially. So
yeah, and there are a lot of people in Chicago to inspire and to engage. For folks, I'm gonna stick with you, Terell. For folks who don't live in the Chicago area, they may get confused as far as the different ensembles that are there. So you have the symphony orchestra, you have the opera, you have the sinfonietta, but then you have the Philharmonic, the Chicago Philharmonic. I wonder how you engage the unique role the Chicago Philharmonic fills in a city that has so many high quality, high level arts institutions, performing arts institutions.
We do have a very rich ecosystem here when it comes to the arts, and yeah. I think we all, like all those institutions that you mentioned, serve a very strong purpose individually, but we also collaborate often. And what's really exciting about the Philharmonic is that our organization is unique because we represent kind of the collection of all those institutions. So we were founded by the Lyric Opera, musicians of the Lyric Opera. And so we have Lyric Opera musicians, Grand Park Symphony, Chicago Symphony, Chicago Sinfonietta. Many of them make up those are the individuals that make up the Chicago Philharmonic. And what's kind of going back to the programming again, we are unique because we're musician governed. And so the artists are the ones driving the car. And so I think that makes the Chicago Philharmonic very nimble. It makes us be able to really do the things that the artists on stage want to do. I think it's so important that they're governing this organization, and I'm serving as executive director, but having this unique governance model with the musicians, with the artists at the forefront of leadership and collaborating with them really sets us apart from other organizations within Chicago, but also in the United States.
Yeah. Marcus, I forget, are you originally from Chicago? Are you a Chicago native?
No, I'm originally from Jackson, Michigan. I just lived in Chicago for some years.
Oh, okay. Well, even with your years of experience living in Chicago, how do you see the Philharmonic's role again in a city where there's so much high quality music happening, especially when we talk, and we're going to get to programming, but when we're talking about diversifying audiences and getting more Black folks involved, is to the general person, is the Chicago Philharmonic different or unique, or do you see one of the challenges being getting folks just toward the concept of the concert space, if that question makes sense?
I think it makes sense. I'm going to answer what I think it is,
yeah,
and
sure.
just feel free to steer me if I'm not on the right track. But
yeah, I guess basically I'm asking from your perspective, are we dealing with getting folks to engage the arts in general, or is it a matter of, well, the Philharmonic is more my speed, or the Chicago Symphony is more my speed, that balance there?
To me, it seems like these are my views. These aren't the Chicago Philharmonic's views, for the record. But for me, it seems more just about like speaking to people on their terms, in terms relevant to their life.
Yeah.
And I think like this composer in residence thing that they're doing is a big step forward for that. Like when I was coming up, I didn't really go to any orchestra concerts, or I didn't really get into concert music until I was an adult. And because it just wasn't, there were no attempts made to be relevant to my life as a young Black man. And I think what the Chicago Phil is doing, I'm obviously, maybe I'm a little biased, but I think what the Chicago Phil is doing now is a big step forward towards that.
Yeah, yeah. And you said you didn't come up going to orchestra concerts or anything, but you did come up, as your bio reads, making beats on pirated on pirated software or whatever. So, with that, I imagine there is, some proximity you have to the streets, as we say, just black folks and black culture, black communities. As you've bloomed, as your career has grown, I wonder if you feel like you've left those communities behind. How does your career now speak to the folks, to the streets?
Oh, it's like 100%. Like everything I do is that's I write music for people like me, and these are who I'm thinking about. I recently got a pretty negative review from like a really older white man, and I remember thinking like, maybe it just wasn't for you. In my head, you know what I mean? It's like everything I write is for people like me. I gave a talk to the musicians. So Chicago Phil just played my first violin concerto called Glory, and I gave a talk to the musicians at the rehearsal that I attended. There's this section in the beginning where I put these Bartok pits in the low strings, where they for those who don't know, Bartok pits is when you pluck the string so hard that it rattles the whole string on the bass. And I was telling them, I'm like, the idea, the inspiration behind this section was growing up and being riding in a hoopty with where the subwoofers are worth more than the car, and every time the bass hit, it just rattles the whole everything. And that was the inspiration behind this moment. So I often think wonder could people who don't have these shared cultural experiences, can you fully appreciate those? And I think you can still appreciate the music, of course, and I hope so.
Yeah.
But there's just so many specific cultural things in my music that I never shy away from. I never try to filter out, and I just lean into.
And maybe even cross-pollination. What when you were mentioning the Bartok pits, I can speak to that, as it exists in that repertoire, but I had to jot it down. I also thought of Don't Sweat the Technique and the bass line in that tune that could be categorized as an example of some Bartok pits. And we will talk about Glory, but Terell, I wanted to offer you the same question. So as your career as an arts administrator has bloomed and taken you across the country, collaborating with all of these different organizations, how do you engage the conversation of not leaving the communities that you identify with behind? How do you take Black communities on the journey that you've been on and that you're continuing on?
That's a great question. I was listening to there was a panel discussion a while back, and they kind of, Titus Underwood put it really, really well. He said, this at least for me, it resonated really well for me. He was talking about big cultural institutions, like the Titans that have the massive venues and the huge city squares, like the epicenter of the arts in cities. And these spaces are funded by the community in many ways, and often the land is donated. And what he said was, if those spaces aren't serving the community, they kind of can turn into a golf course.
Right.
And I was like, whoa, because I respect golf. I never had the opportunity to play golf though. So for me, it's like, man, I would love to start, but I just that resonated with me because it was very true. If you have this, land is so precious and you have this space, and if you're not really serving your full community, then for many people, it can turn into a golf course. So, for me, it's so important to be inclusive and to make sure that everyone feels welcome to enter a space. And, I want my family to come,
Yeah.
It's so important for me to see people on stage, to see people in the audience that look like me or don't look like me. I want to see everyone there. So that's been essential for me. I can't speak to it enough that it's our responsibility to make sure that our patrons feel comfortable, that that our artists feel comfortable being on stage. You know, that the people there feel that they're included and they're a part of this community. So nonprofits and the arts, I think it's our mission. It has to be our mission to be directly rooted into the community and to be a welcoming space. So that's been very, very important for me as I look to the future for the Philharmonic. The ways we can be more inclusive are going to be essential. I mean, it's funny, Marcus, when you're saying about like having the 12s in the back of your car, because, you know, I had that two-door Hyundai accent, you know, with
Come on, Hyundai accent.
and the back. and so it's funny for me to hear that because I'm like, oh, that's exactly right. So
it's so specific, man. I don't know. I'm big on that, man. These are our stories, and we got to tell them.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. And Terell, maybe you and the other folks with executive director in their title in Chicago can go on a group golf trip. Y'all can go diversify the golf course in that way.
I need lessons, please. I would love to.
So Marcus, I do want to talk about Glory, just a really incredible piece of music. And it reminds me of a conversation that I feel like we're getting closer to, or we're being forced to get closer to in art spaces. We have music that is Black. I'm thinking about Nina Simone, and even the very Black Afro-American Symphony of William Grant Still. And then we have music that fits the aesthetic of those spaces that I feel like happens to be by Black folks. I'm thinking about Joseph Bologna, even Samuel Coleridge Taylor to a degree. So with all of that stuff in mind, I wonder where on that spectrum you see Glory. Are you writing music that Black folks identify as Black, or is this orchestral music that happens to be by a Black person?
So how that's a great question, but how I think about it is like, I try to approach all these things like, what if they didn't exist and they were invented by a young Black man in his 20s today?
Mm-hmm.
What would that be like? That's kind of like my way of doing it. And I think about like for example, like, because Black folks, like, I heard a European composer say in undergrad that like a lot of like European composers don't even like approach like orchestral music or like string quartets until they're like 40, because they have this like weight of like Beethoven and all these like geniuses weights on their shoulder. But like for me, my personal views are just like, like of like the Malcolm school, where it's like they never loved this, like we not part of that. So I don't have none of that weight. So I can just do whatever I want to do and write whatever I want to write. And like I said, when the bass comes in, it's very much boom, 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 boom. It's very much to me, it's very Black to me, or like there's very like lush parts of it where it's like these progressions are like progressions I learned studying like Robert Glasper and these type of things, or even I would say even just like the attitude of it. It like, especially like the solo parts, I think are like super Black. But I guess to like more specifically answer your question, like where I would be on the spectrum, I think about it less like that, and I think about it more like instead of like two patches of fabric that I'm sewing together, I think about it like, what if you just took those fabric all the way apart down to the threads and then just kind of like wove them together to make something new that you like, like it's not red, it's not blue, it's like purple. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and that in itself is a part of the Black tradition, even outside of music, just taking things and making them new. That's beautiful. And the Chicago Philharmonic performance wasn't the first performance of Glory, and it certainly won't be the last. I'm sorry that one of the orchestras that performed Glory, the Jackson Symphony, I used to play down there, so I hate that the timeline didn't work out for me to play that piece there. But I wonder what you learned about yourself as a composer with each performance of this piece of music. Do you hear one orchestra play it and you say, oh shoot, I need to go back and make the second flute part do this? Or is that a part of the process?
Yeah, and that's also very Black.
Sure.
It's like to me, it's like, I don't know, I always have to tell people like, this piece of paper is not the music. It's like the people in the room together playing it, that's the music. And this is just like, like an instruction manual or like a playbook. kind of like to use a sports reference. So it's definitely always changing and it's evolving. And that's another thing I picked up from my friend. I think it's our mutual friend, Adrian Dunn.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
like
Shout
I've
out
been
to
working.
Adrian.
Shout out to Adrian, man. But I've been like, so we met when I was like really young, like, I don't know, 22, 21 or something like that. And I've got to work with him all these years. And like Adrian is like notorious from that. It's like what's on the paper is like a loose suggestion at best. but I really respected that because it's like, he's just always willing to, like, it's always about making the music better, and he's not afraid to, like, well, if it's going to be better this way when we put it on the people, then let's do it. And then I think he performs a lot of his own music, whereas that's not my role. So it's like I have the added burden of like I have to go back and write it all down again. But
Yeah.
but definitely there's like a lot of like little things. And even after this last performance we just did like a week or two ago, it's like I got like a list of things I need to like notate in. A lot of it comes down to like maybe the vision doesn't change, but like just getting more and more clear about the notation. Even like what you just said. You I don't remember if the recording had started at that time, but you were saying like for Miss Me, it's like not everybody can read that clef. So I'm gonna need to go back and figure out another way to write it so that like I eventually I'm not gonna be able to be at all the performances, or like long time, knock on wood, I'll be gone, and you would love for people to be able to keep playing it without having to pick my brain about it.
Yeah. Or to be fair, maybe we bassoonists need to step our game up and just read that treble clef and, man up, woman up in that way.
Well, you're a bassoonist, so you could say it. I can't.
So, and Terell, this of course brings us back to the conversation of programming, the critique, the little dust in the corners that folks in my line of work will always throw out is, well, it's great that you got Marcus's Peace Glory on a program, but that's one composer and one piece of music and one moment. I wonder how you approach the idea of programming in general. I mean, you have folks like me who would say just make the whole season black, and then you have folks on the other side who would say, well, we have to speak to all of our communities. How do you approach a good balance while changing the field and using your position of power and influence to the greatest ability you can?
That's a great question. I think in terms of changing the field, something I noticed people were getting stuck on a couple, like maybe a year or two ago, when we were really focusing on being more inclusive in orchestral music. I noticed people were focusing on exclusively, if you're adding Black artists, it means like they're putting themselves in a box. You can only play Marcus's piece.
Mm-hmm.
Or I feel like the options were limitless, because we could obviously, the Chicago Philharmonic, we've added a composers in residence program because we want to also be increasing the rep and also highlighting all the great artists that are out there. But also these things are simple as there are so many tremendous Black performers too. So Amen. Just because you can still play, the standard rep and there's great, fantastic artists out there. And now they're all kind of on high demand. It's impossible, to start comparing to people because now we're all like, oh my goodness, these people have always been there.
You love to see it.
Yeah.
It's like Black History Month all year now.
Yes, yeah. But what I think is so strange was that some people were focusing exclusively, if you wanted to play a certain piece, you couldn't have, Mozart clarinet concerto with the Black clarinetist. Of course, you have Anthony McGill. There's so many terrific musicians out there. So just because maybe we didn't write the piece doesn't mean we can't perform it. So I think it was interesting, that dichotomy, that certain places were kind of in this reflection of being more inclusive. They were kind of forgetting obviously all these great works should be added, but we have great musicians to play everything. Mm-hmm. So I think the options are limitless in terms of having more diversity in our art form, because we can either be executive director, we can be the composer of the works on the program, or we can be the artist performing it. So I think those options are limitless. So I don't really, in terms of programming and providing that guidance, I don't think I'm trying to limit in any way who's on the program. I think because the options are abundant.
Yeah.
I will say I am super proud of obviously us having this Don Milanovic Composers in Residence program, because I do think that we really need to be doing more to push forward the young composers, and also just playing new music. I think is so important. So in terms of programming and planning for a concert, that balance between new music and the old standard pieces, I don't think there's a formula to that. I don't, in terms of programming, I don't think people should be thinking about ticket sales. Like if you're programming a certain piece, oh, that concert, it didn't sell well, so let's never do it again. This is the long haul. Like if that was the case, Rite of Spring would have been played once and that was it.
Right.
People, like, you have to know, you have to invest. So I'm committed to investing and making sure that we are teaching our audiences about new great music. We're exposing our audiences to new artists, and just investing in the future. So that's why I'm so excited that Marcus is a part of this program for 3 years. We have Jonathan Bingham and Ronaldo Moya for the next 3 years, because we're in it for the long haul, to invest in our art.
Yeah, that sounds like some radical thought from a person in a position like yours. Don't pay so much attention to the ticket sales, or don't center the ticket sales when you talk about programming. I love to hear it. That to me feels like change, but you're pushing on something that I think is important, a really important point. The programming toward diversifying an audience is one thing, but you're right. The musicians who play the music play a huge role in that. Now, as we know, it's different getting a Black guest artist on stage than, making the core of your orchestra look more diverse. How do you engage that part of the conversation? I know we have union rules and, audition requirements. So I wonder if you could talk about how you plan on at least thinking about diversifying the orchestra itself toward diversifying the audience.
Yeah, so I think we have a unique, position, because we're not in a typical structure of another organization in terms of like tenure and everything like that. Our group, it's more inclusive, so we can get right out and go to the great schools. We can go to Howard, we can go to HBCUs, we can go to Juilliard and start just recruiting great musicians. We obviously have a huge community of musicians in Chicago to pull from. So it's very simple to be a part of our organization. If you're a great player, we're very welcoming, and the process is pretty inclusive already. But I do have plans in the future to make it more accessible, because when I lived here, I wasn't incredibly familiar with the Philharmonic. I just didn't have the exposure to it, and now I want to make sure that other young Black musicians, other BIPOC musicians are aware of our organization and that they have the ability to perform with us. Marcus mentioned Adrian Dunn. Adrian is a great collaborator. We had an amazing time on a performance with him this past June. I think also collaborating with other diverse organizations, with other Black artists, is important to let people know, like, hey, like, we are committed to really creating the space. So yeah, it's a lot of things, and it's a long-term plan, but I'm very excited for the future for us.
Yeah, Marcus, I'm gonna turn back to you. So let's say, and again, as we're thinking about the way orchestras look, the identity and experiences within an orchestra, let's say you put glory on the music stand of an orchestra. The Black folks, we're immediately gonna be able to draw some proximity just from the title before we hear anything. Maybe in your future compositions, you title something Praise Break, or I don't know. So there are certain cultural things that are attached there, and also opportunities to teach folks in the orchestra or in those ensembles that may not have that direct line of understanding. Do you see that as I hate to use the word burdensome, but it seems like, artists, composers, music creators just want to create the music and then let it happen. But it seems like there's a lot of teaching that you have to do on your side of the work as well, considering, you know, how diverse orchestras look, and, you know, if I may say, how Black folks are still the minority in those groups. You know, how do you approach that part of it?
So, you know, I'm still learning, I'm still evolving, and I go through phases. Like a few years ago, I got into this, like, I don't know, angry 20s phase where I was just like, I ain't explaining nothing to nobody. It's like, y'all want to play you figure it out. And it just on that part, I got exhausted. I got exhausted from like explaining my humanity to white organizations or to white folks, or like sometimes it's not. In certain situations, there are certain people who sometimes don't really even want to understand your thing. And then if you talk how I talk and you look how I look, they automatically assume that you don't know what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
On top of that, or like, or another one I get a lot is like, and me and Adrian have talked about this at length, but another one I get a lot is like, they think it just kind of like God just speaks through me, and there's just this, like, it's just this intuitive thing, like, oh, you just have, like, Black folks just have this intuitive melodic voice and all this, and it's like yeah, no, I do, but I'm also like a master at my craft and all these things. So I got real irritated a few years ago, and I was just like, I stopped writing program notes and was just like, it is what it is. Basically I just kept saying, if you know, you know what I mean? Because like you said, it's like, the people I was writing for know. And but all that going to said is like, I've grown some in the last year, and met some great allies, and met some people who, there are more people. I guess I'm choosing now to focus on the people who do want to understand and who do approach it from a place of love. And I think that it's better for my music and all these things, but also for my mental health.
Yeah.
So now I'm trying to get better at that, about like thinking about ways to talk about these things. But like you said, not taking on a burden of it, or not feeling like I have to, or like basing any of my value on whether or not people outside our culture appreciate it. But still, it's like, for those who really do come from a genuine place and love it and want to understand, I'm working on getting better and clearer, I guess, at like giving that cultural context and talking about what these things mean to us. Because at the core, we are talking about very specific Black experiences, but like a lot of our things are human experiences that other people can understand. If that makes sense.
Yeah. That word fatigue is resonating with me. You know, Terell, in the rooms you've been in, I'm sure that at some point you have felt that sort of fatigue as well. On the administrative side of things, how do you deal with that fatigue of feeling like you always have to teach? Or, you know, I know we always have the conversation of being the representative, but sometimes when you're the only one or one of the few Black folks in the room, there are things that you just have to explain, right? Is that not a part of it?
It is. That is a part of. It's a burden, you know, we have. I think it's important to have your personal board of directors. You know, we all gotta, like, this is like our community, your friends, your family, you know, those people that you can have around you. And during those times when you are feeling fatigued, you know, if you have the people you're sharing your goals with, and they know what your passion and your mission is. And sometimes if you think you're getting off track, you got to check in with your personal board, you know, and you gotta get, I have, you know, my core group of friends that we talk about things. I mean, these last 2 years have been a roller coaster. I don't know how to put it, but so that's the word I'll use. And I think having that core group of trusted friends and family to just, you know, talk to people that you know are sharing this experience with you, can understand. I think it's so important. And you got to make sure you have time for yourself, you know, to recharge. So it's important to also at times just to check in and make sure that you're doing all right, and that you know the mission. And sometimes it's not always, sometimes we have to, like, this is me personally, and I'm not saying for everybody, but sometimes it's important to take a step back and say, like, is this right for me? To educate this person at this moment, should I take a step back and make sure that I'm going to put it in the right way that's respectful, and that we can continue to communicate together and get to whatever, this project done we need to do, or whatever, that we're communicating in a good way. So that's a tough one to say, but I'll go back to it's your personal board. I think you got to have the right people around you, especially as you move through your career. Because Marcus, I think what you were saying is so important. Like, if you're feeling fatigued and you don't have those right people around you, and you're always trying to educate people, I think it can be just really trying to your creative process, or to any process, any field, really.
Yeah. I feel like, to all of that, there come those moments, especially on the administrative side of the arts, of dissonance that begets change. So, what I'm thinking about right now, I wear locks, you wear locks. Once upon a time, this hair was unprofessional, right? And someone had to go and challenge that, and maybe make things uncomfortable, and maybe even risk their own position in these spaces to make that change. What are your words to, folks climbing a similar path as you on the administrative side of things, when it comes to actually challenge and having the bravery to do something that you may not think will maintain your position in those spaces?
Oh, Garrett, that's your superpower. Challenging, that's your superpower. You can't, don't veer off track. Sometimes it's okay to pull over for a moment, take a pit stop, but don't,
Sure.
don't veer off. Hey, my locks are still here. You have to be yourself. You have to be your authentic self. And so my words of encouragement are just that if someone feels that they're looking for a position and they have something about them, their locks, their tattoos, or whatever, and they think that's going to prevent them from getting the job they want, then that's not the right job. That's not the right culture. If those type of things, if it's not your talent, your skills, what you bring, all of your experience, if those things are overlooked and people are basing things off of your appearance or whatever, then that's not the right job. And there's something much better where you can be your authentic self. And so my words of advice are, those type of things, we've all thought it. Trust me, I've thought it before. Like, if I go into this interview and they, is that going to be an issue? But I just say, like, hey, if that's an issue, that I don't need to be here anyway.
Yeah.
So I really just, you got to be your authentic self. And if going into a space that people can't accept that, then that's not the right space, not the right culture.
Yeah.
But if you are in the right space, sorry, I picked up my baton.
Y'all say you're ready.
Oh, it's getting real now. All right.
Sometimes I gotta fidget. If you are in the right space and you have individuals in that space that are, toxic to the culture, it is important just to speak up. It is important, and you can't have a fear of, like, facing retaliation. It's important to tell people if they're not being inclusive in a space, they're not being welcoming, and it's because it's probably, you're not the only one who's probably feeling that way.
Right.
So I think that is also very important to make clear too.
Yep. I have one more question that I wanted to throw out to the both of you. And actually, Terell, it's interesting that you brought up Titus Underwood's name, because he's actually going to be one of the topics of discussion as we wrap up this opus of the podcast, specifically when it comes to some of the drama he was dealing with down at the Nashville Symphony. So, as we've seen from that news and otherwise, the classical music white lash, as I call it, is very real. It's not just cute and safe, not as cute and safe as it was, a few years ago, 5-10 years ago, to talk about diversifying classical music spaces, because as we've seen actual impact and actual change, we've seen folks challenging that change and trying to flip the script on Black folks and other folks trying to, promote equity in classical spaces. So, to all of that, I'll start with you, Marcus. Do we have, from your perspective, a harder road ahead of us than we've seen so far, and how are you going to, gird your loins, so to speak, in preparation for the challenges that we have to come, that we're just beginning to see manifest in our work, or as a reaction to our work?
Can you talk a little bit more about specifically about the Titus thing, and what you mean by that, in case I missed any details?
Well, sure, and I'll speak generally. We've seen
Okay.
articles come out about how so-called woke culture is taking over classical
Yeah.
spaces, and so basically that discourse, I think, is really beginning to move to the front. How do you plan on facing or engaging or combating that as you move forward in your career?
Just being unapologetically me, unapologetically Black, talking that talk, making great Black art with great Black artists, and letting people cry about it, man. I don't know. Like,
You said be mad and stay mad.
yeah, be mad, stay mad, die mad, bro. I don't care. I I don't know. Everything you're saying is spot on. Like people, it is less, or it is like more angry and more outward. Like I said, I just got like this weird review, and it was like very much an attack on me, and called my work, how to use the coded language, like street smart,
Sure.
or something like this. And it was like, can you say that? But it just I don't know, man. It just, not everyone. I do recognize the seriousness of it, and I do recognize that not everyone, like some people's positions, I'm in a position where I can be like, cry about it, and it's not going to affect like the way I eat or the way I move through these things. And I recognize that some people have it tougher than that. And I would love to hear how I can help the cause for those people more. But from my position, it's like, cry about it, man. I feel like even like in what you do, it's like I'm big on giving people their flowers, and I feel like not many people, like two parts. Like, one, can talk about the art the way you talk about it, but two, is like talk about Black art with like the reverence and love and respect that you talk about Black music with. And I think the point is, I think you're one of the rare people where it's like, the game needs you a lot more than you need the game, in my opinion. You know what I mean? And
Sure.
I think there's a lot of Black artists like that, man, where it's like, I think, and I think that applies to Black art as a whole too. I
Right.
guess is the point I'm saying, is like, this game needs us a lot more than we need this game, man. We've been doing fine without it for a long time. But hey, but you're lucky. We decided that, hey, we want this too. We want to make this cool, the way we made everything else in American history cool. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's my thoughts.
Yeah. Same question to you, Terell. Well, first of all, do you see the road ahead being rougher than the road behind us, considering what I describe as white lash coming to the front in response to DEI initiatives in classical spaces, and how you plan on dealing with that on your side of the field moving forward?
It's amazing. So, well, I'm going to answer your question with a question to you too, though.
Sure.
It's amazing because it was always here, right?
Mm-hmm.
But now, because we've all experienced these things, but in a way, I'm happy that everyone knows it now, because it was tough, moving through spaces. My main instrument's clarinet, and being only Black person in a space playing the clarinet at times. And when things would happen, people like, did you see that? Or did you notice that? And people like, no, that's just, in your head. But now, those experiences, you look back and it's like, man, that was really not right.
Yeah.
And the response now, like this very positive, and also at times very negative response, I think it has helped to not be gaslighted anymore, to know like, oh, my feelings were really relevant, and my experience is really relevant. And now I can do everything in my power to make sure that someone coming from behind me, I'm leaving doors open behind myself for other people to come through. And I'm aware of, I've firsthand experienced many of these things in terms of playing in this field. And I've experienced the wonderful things about playing in this field. And I have a full understanding of both. And so my question back to you is, although it is, there has been this response, this negative response, doesn't it feel good to know that we were right? that like when we said to the personnel manager or whatever, like this person was being, kind of disrespectful, and people kind of blew it off. For some reason, this might be me just, I don't know, being kind of masochist, being a masochist about it, but it is very helpful just knowing that people can be overt about it now, and you really see these people are being allies. We have allies now, and we know who those allies are, and we know, like, hey, maybe we don't want to take a donation from this person.
Right.
And so I kind of feel that it's just having this transparency now is in a way a positive, because we really know who we need to align ourselves with. We know who we need to be collaborating with now. And we know that people that this might be not the best people to align ourselves with, and maybe for our organizations to not accept donations from, if they're not. Yep.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you was finished.
No, never. You always got to cut me off. I'll go on forever. Especially you put me on a podcast, Garrett. I'm going to go on forever. But no, I just think really it's about, now we know people who might not be, EDI is essential. It's essential. So if there are people who are pushing back, they have to ask themselves, why are they pushing back? And we have to push ourselves forward.
Yeah. Final word, Marcus.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, I feel like he snuck it in, but he like touched on like the key of a lot of this, of like one of these things for navigating this is you talking about like having the ability to be in a position to where you could like turn down donations, or and as far as like an individual status is like and it's super easier said than done, but it's to like put yourself in a position a lot of times financially where it's like, I know, hey, if this person at this gig talks to me crazy, or all it takes is one wrong word, I'm out. You know what I mean? It's like, and my bills are paid. I think, and again, it's super easier said than done, but I think that independence is what he kind of touched on at the end of that. I think that's really important for us as we try to move through these things, so that, because that's always been the power in a lot of these spaces, is because these institutions have the money. So yeah, it's easier said than done, but I feel like that's like a major key that he kind of like snuck in there. I just want to make sure people caught that.
Don't sweat the technique. Don't sweat the technique. Let's trace the hits and check the file. Let's see who bit the dissect the style.
Another classic composition there, an American classic, a little Eric B. and Rakim, Don't Sweat the Technique. Of course, I'm putting that in because in the conversation, Marcus brought up the idea of Bartok pizzicatos, the idea of doing a pizz so hard that the string kind of rattles, and how he is able to, tell folks that's the sound he's looking for without using that vocabulary, or with using that vocabulary, how it goes both ways. And the first thing I thought of was the bass line there, and Don't Sweat the Technique, some great music there. Before we get into the final movement, one thing I wanted to ask you that we got into in the discussion, I ended with, do we have a harder road ahead of us, considering what we've seen with the backlash to all of this work in classical spaces, the way that these comment sections look, the all of the silence from so many arts organizations. So, what do you think about that? When we talk about equity in classical spaces, Western classical spaces, do you think we have yet to see the hard part, the actual rocky road?
Yeah, let me put it this way. It's harder than I thought it was going to be. How about that?
Yeah. And it can be demoralizing, but
yes, it is.
But at the same time,
and it's messy.
I'm affirmed because I'm like, okay, I'm doing something. This is work that can be done. This is a not a blank slate. I don't mean to say that, but just a space that needs some attention, some love and care. And I can provide that. So that's something that, affirms me and excites me about the work. So the work has to be done in many different ways. We're media people here. You have Marcus, who's a composer. You have Terell, who's in the building at the tables, and we need all of that, everyone wherever they are doing that work and pushing forward so that we can make some progress like they have been seeing with the Chicago Philharmonic. So a huge shout out and thank you to both Terell and Marcus for coming on. I'll have links to all of their things in the description of this. Well, to get us into the TRILLOQUY with our trill, I wanted to be accountable. I've been telling the people I've been practicing. So I'm gonna share. So at the end of October, I'm playing the Rossini concerto along with some transcribed William Grant Still songs. But that Rossini, it's giving me. I am exercising. The fingers are getting an exercise. Anyway, so there's a nice trill at the end of the solo exposition of the first movement of the Rossini concerto. So here's a little clip from my practice session ending with that trill to get us into the fourth movement. So a trill there at the end of that. It's funny, I'm old enough now to feel the out of shapeness. So
I was going to ask how your lungs were holding up.
I mean, more than the lungs, it's my chops, it's my face that is like, oh my gosh! After 20 minutes of playing, it used to be I could play a 2-3 hour concert and be fine. But the old age is setting in. So listen, kids, if you're at home, don't stop practicing now.
Yeah.
Because even after 6 months or a year, it's almost like rebuilding the boat. But I'm excited. I'm excited to get back in. I'm excited to be able to do what the orchestra wants as far as getting, some of the so-called traditional repertoire out there alongside bringing myself and my aesthetic and my opinion on the genre, but also the Rossini bassoon concerto, as few pieces the bassoon has. It's one of the ones that a lot of folks don't know and it gets sort of overlooked. So I wanted to, at least if I had to dig into the Western European canon, to have something that folks don't hear every day. It's not the Mozart, it's not one of the Webers, it's not the Hummel, it's the Rossini. So looking forward to that, and I might need a bassoonist or two to listen to me and tell me what I'm not hearing, because it's but anyway, and I don't say it with sorrow, I say it with excitement. It feels good to rebuild the ship in that way. I'm enjoying the exercise I'm getting. All right, so we're here in the fourth movement. The sort of main event for this week's TRILLOQUY, this week's final movement, comes from freebeacon.com. The headline is How Racial Anxiety Conquered an Orchestra and Crushed a Career. All right, long story short, this article is in response to a man getting fired from the Nashville Symphony after harassing our friend, the great Titus Underwood. Okay, so back when all of this was going down, when he won his audition, even before that, when he first started subbing in with the Nashville Symphony, he complained about some racial harassment coming from members of the orchestra and from the wind section. The first time he was supposed to be on TRILLOQUY, actually, we recorded an interview and he asked me to pull it and not publish it because things were getting so hot. He had restraining orders. There was police protection. This was a serious issue.
I was going to ask you if that was the incident in question around that whole thing, but didn't you also say that he had to leave his home for a month or two?
I forgot about that. He had to leave his home for a little while because the man was stalking him, and this clarinet player ended up getting fired from the orchestra, and this article is sort of making a martyr out of him. I'll read a little bit of it. I'll start from the top here. It says, most people haven't heard of James Zimmerman, but most have heard him. A decorated musician with a long string of acoustic accolades, Zimmerman has made the sound of his clarinet difficult to avoid. Zimmerman was the principal clarinetist of the Nashville Symphony for more than a decade. That is, until the orchestra fired him last February over accusations of racial harassment. To hear his accusers tell it, Zimmerman Zimmerman had insulted, intimidated, and even stalked his black colleagues, going as far as to menacingly drive by their homes. I'll let y'all read the rest of that, but basically this article is trying to make Titus sound like he crazy, trying to gaslight him. One of the things that I pulled from this that I think is really significant that you'll see as you take a closer look at this, the accused, James Zimmerman, had allies and accomplices in the whole thing. The article speaks to how members of the wind section were played a role in trying to diminish Titus's contributions to the orchestra, saying that he had tuning issues. There are people who were consulted in writing this article talking about how they disagree with the firing of James Zimmerman and he wasn't a racist and X, Y, and Z. So, you know, my thing is, Scott, what are we fighting for? You know, articles like this and stories like this just bring me to what are we fighting for? Because it's one thing for an orchestra to get rid of a racist member who is harassing a black player, especially considering how few there are in the field, Titus being the only one in that orchestra, the only tenured member anyway in that orchestra. But it's so insidious that there are people who are just in the shadows supporting the mess, supporting the racism. They aren't going to do it enough to get themselves outed and fired like James Zimmerman did, but they are right there, and those are Titus's colleagues. What sort of work environment is that? Is this our king? Is that what we're fighting for? You know, a spot in an orchestra where we just have to sit around and try to play the best we can with white people who want to see us get kicked right out of the door? Because that's what it is in this situation, and that's what's plainly outlined in this article. I mean, what were some of your takeaways from reading this?
I went and I poked around the website just to see what else was in, what is it, the Washington Free Beacon. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it's funded by a billionaire conservative. So I think that partially shaped the narrative as you see it. Of course. They're, you know, trying to make Titus sound like he's crazy. And, you know, the gentleman in question here, Zimmerman, is it? Wasn't stalking. He was thinking about buying a house in the area, and then he was really cutting through to avoid traffic was another thing.
They'll come up with anything.
That's kind of what I was getting to, because I had to read this 4 times because it reads like the script of a whodunit or something. You know, some sort of a detective show. Yeah. And I still haven't absorbed all of the ins and outs of this.
And Titus, you know, is someone who I have known for over a decade now. We've played together in Los Angeles. We've performed together with Gateways and Sphinx. We're always in the mix. You know, you have met Titus. And what I want to get from you, when it comes to Titus's forwardness, when it comes to Black pride, equity, Black power, you can't hide it, right? I mean, when you meet him and when you spend enough time with him, you understand that is a part of who he is. I mean, but that's from my perspective. Do you get that from him after having met him a couple times?
Titus is very magnetic.
Yeah,
he'll draw you in, and the way that he speaks, you know, I appreciated just being able to sit and listen to him go off for a while at the Sphinx conference, you know.
And there are people, I'm sure, in this orchestra, in the Nashville Symphony, and even beyond, who will take Titus's aura, you know, the whole "you're not gonna fuck with Titus" aura of it all, and say, "Oh, well, we really don't need that energy." They'll use the word political. We don't want this to be political and all of that thing. This is all about the music. But my thing is, how can it be only about the music if you aren't affirming the people in that group?
Is that wrong?
You know, how can you be a cohesive wind section, much less a cohesive orchestra, if the people behind those instruments, especially the marginalized people like Titus, if they aren't being affirmed? So I'm sorry, and I checked in with Titus, and he's doing okay, but it's something how even being in existence, it's not like Titus drummed up a protest or a riot or something outside of Orchestra Hall. He took an audition, went through all of the bullshit of the audition process that is also laid out in here. You know,
Right.
how you can be the last man or the last woman standing and
still
still
not
maybe
get it.
not get even a trial, much less the job. So that's laid out here. But, you know, adding on to that, just the fact that he showed up, he did all of his practicing. He went to music school, landed of this job, became the first black principal oboist in a major American symphony orchestra. Just existing in this space was enough to drum up all of this drama. And you have writers like this and publications like this trying to flip it and say that the system is wrong. Let me read the final, because the final bits of this article is really what's crazy. It says here, Zimmerman agrees with his colleagues that he was railroaded, but he also agrees with the orchestra about one point. At the end of the day, Underwood was the real victim of the whole saga. I get to walk away with integrity, says Zimmerman,
How?
who told the Free Beacon he regrets sending this email. But Underwood, quote, has his whole career built on a house of cards. I feel sorry for him. Actually, James Zimmerman, I feel sorry for you, because you are around here acting like, oh, I was just doing this and I was doing that and and you're the one fired, okay? And I'm very sensitive, Scott, about stories about job terminations for obvious reasons, because the story that happened, and as told by the press, will never be the actual story. But I am confident, both in my relationship with Titus, A, and B, my relationship with the issue of orchestras. You know, I'm not just speaking with a complete outside perspective. I've been in
Right.
those rooms. I've been on
Right.
those stages. I've taken the auditions. So I can affirm and understand what it's like to be a black man in those spaces. And then to be lucky enough to win one of these jobs, and then to have to put up with all of that. We have to just acknowledge, as I was saying with the border stuff, what it is. It is just flat out racism. There are people from the orchestra quoted in this article saying, oh, well, there's no way that James Zimmerman is a racist and all of that stuff. White folks, I have something to tell y'all. You are not qualified to say what is and what isn't racist, because you haven't spent your life racialized. You can recognize racism when it looks like a white hood or when it looks like the N-word, but you can't recognize it when it looks like what we're dealing with here. And then when you have people with power and money with that fucked up perspective, it's flipped around to where James Zimmerman is the victim, and we're supposed to be sorry for Titus because his career is built on a house of cards. Get out of here. I'm done.
There's too many Bizarro world things going on in this art. I don't even know if I want to go back and look at it again, because even right in the beginning, evidently Zimmerman approached Titus and said, hey, there's an N-word in this song that I want to cover. Can I do it? What? So what? Why ask Titus?
We know why.
No, but you need to find a new song is the thing.
Period.
But why is that? What does that add to the story? To what happened? What does that tidbit add to?
What they think it adds is, you see how reasonable James Zimmerman was? I mean, he even went and asked for permission and But you're right. It's like the whole representative part of it is problematic, but also just find a new song. I hope that James Zimmerman didn't actually say the N-word to Titus.
Said that he did.
Because if it was me, and especially where I am in my life and my career right now, James Zimmerman will be having to find a set of teeth so he could play that clarinet. Because you put your teeth on the top of the mouthpiece.
Sure.
He'd have a problem playing that damn clarinet when you're done with me. And the thing is, Titus is probably more reasonable than I am in that regard. But the more of us that fill up those spaces, the more of the more of folks getting dealt with we're going to see, because for too long it has been one of those protected spaces where all of this nonsense can happen. The big point, as I'm closing up here, the big point that I want to make is that we all, to the allies, accomplices, the potential accomplices, and especially the people of color, I think we need to just take the time and back up from the picture and say, is this what we want? Is this what we're fighting for? Because James Zimmerman Zimmerman was not alone in this orchestra. There are folks cited in this article, and I'm sure there are other people who are completely silent and who haven't said anything, who would love to see Titus kicked out the door, and who felt like James Zimmerman and his racism, there was nothing wrong with that. So what are we going to do about the space? Folks love to talk about changing things from the inside. Okay, you have to actually change things from the inside. Being a good employee, being a good member of these all white or predominantly white systems is not changing anything, and it's not being on the right side of the work. If you are falling well into the wavelengths of the white supremacist culture of classical music spaces, you're on the wrong side of the battle. You're on the wrong team. And that's just that. Obviously, Titus found some stuff that was problematic and dealt with it, and someone had to be dismissed for it. Okay, but there, as I've been saying, there's so many more people who have remained silent and quiet, and they're going to have to be dealt with. So I think our weapon against that is standing in our truth, not hiding behind anything, and really speaking up when we see these racist things happening. Because really, it should have been one of the tenured members of the orchestra talking about these things and bringing it to HR. Titus should not have had to be at the front of this and bearing the brunt of this. It should have been one of those so-called good white people doing that. But where were they? Anyway, so go check out that article. I'll have that posted in the description. Love and light and encouragements to Titus. I hope you have many successful seasons with the Nashville Symphony. I hope that you have the courage to continue to speak up and to even move on if you have to. And I'm going to say that part. I want there to be more black people in these orchestras, because there are black people who want to be in them, and they deserve to be in them if that's what they want. You know, that is true. And what is also true is that we don't have to deal with this. We don't have to deal with all of this violence to express ourselves musically and artistically. And we have to stop pretending like this is the only way, especially when we see stories like these come out. So that's that. Final thing before we say goodbye for this week, as I alluded to in the beginning. If you're on Facebook, go like and follow the TRILLOQUY Facebook page. So every week, from all of the contributions and things, it all goes back into TRILLOQUY. I spend about $250, sometimes some months $300 on promotion of TRILLOQUY. That's either underwriting on other podcasts or other YouTube channels, getting them to shout out TRILLOQUY, all this stuff. But one of the more consistent ones was running ads on Facebook. For the past 3 weeks now, Facebook has been flagging TRILLOQUY's posts and taking them down and not allowing them to fly, because TRILLOQUY allegedly speaks to a special interest group, and it is against their policies to promote special interests. So, I mean, if the special interest is racial equity and justice in the classical music space, I mean,
Is that wrong?
Hashtag delete Facebook.
I know.
Hashtag delete Facebook.
Yeah, I may have to get there, but
I did mine years ago, and it has been so great.
But at the same
So
time,
great.
that is a huge point of discovery for so many people. I would probably say there are 500 people, who have jumped on to TRILLOQUY just from there. When I'm looking at
Sure.
the analytics from week to week from the advertisement, so it's a considerable thing. But it's just not fair the way that they pigeonhole those of us who are trying to make change into politics or special interests or whatever, just because I'm using phrases like white supremacy.
Will Facebook even let you post a link to the show?
They'll let me post a link to the show. They haven't blocked me that hard, but none of my advertisements go through. So I'm hoping that if I get some more energy and some more movement on the Facebook page, that might shift something. So be an ally and a potential accomplice to the work that we're doing here by doing that. If you're on Facebook, I understand that a lot of people have thrown that to the side. I get that, and I affirm that. I also affirm that we just can't let these spaces be problematic. And if there is a space, especially a social media space like Facebook, that isn't allowing certain things, certain narratives, I just can't let that be. I'm going to continue to push week after week on that front and on every front. So, continue to support and continue to help, because this is a real battle that we're facing, and one that I think we can win. I hope y'all again, I'll shout out the masks and the vaccines because that is still a thing. Do everything you can to stay safe, especially as you're traveling. I'm gonna have 3 masks on this plane, and I'm gonna have my earbuds so no one even don't even look at me spreading your particles. Okay, so stay safe out there, y'all, and we'll see you next week.